In this week's blood-spewing episode of Berserk, Guts, Puck, and Farnace escape from a horde of angry demons and take refuge in an abandoned mansion filled with demonic dogs, an obsessive and monstrous caretaker, and a creepy, nightmare-inducing possessed horse, which won't allow you to ride it, but it certainly wants to ride you. For all the sick and twisted Berserk fans who are afraid that this episode was not going to have the horse-raping Farnace scene, well, sleep easy. It's definitely here, and it's just as disturbing as it is in the manga version. This episode right here was very interesting, as technically it is a filler, but it's a combination of like multiple chapters into one. The main apostle, or superpowered demon who appears in this episode, is actually one that is seen much earlier in the manga version when Guts actually gets the Dragon Slayer sword for the very first time. So I'm really glad that they were able to incorporate this character in and actually give him a little bit of character aside from just being a pissed off demon who wants to fuck Guts up. But really, this episode right here was a lot of fun. Basically just a trek through a disgusting haunted mansion filled with all types of demons that Guts is going to take a lot of pleasure in slaying. He makes it very clear in this episode that his main goal is to hunt down the Apostles, which are humans which have been transformed into demonic entities. Case in point, they arrive at this old mansion which belonged to this one count, another allusion to another character from the manga version, and the only person who lives there now is this caretaker who looked after the dogs. And he himself actually does transform into this like weird bulldog demon where it actually looks like the massive demon is actually eating him while he's actually in control of all of it. Just a great showcase for what all of the apostles and demons are going to look like in the Berserk series, which is to say, they look pretty freaking freaky. The dogs themselves are pretty horrifying as well. They don't look like normal dogs at all. Their faces get completely twisted and contorted, and they just look completely freaking messed up, but it's an excuse to see Guts just completely destroy them. The thing is, though, you also have Farnace, who is being introduced to all of this crazy shit, and even starting to question her very own religion, and having to sort of, like, deal with all of this shit as it's coming at her. Not to mention, she's having to dodge the advances of multiple demons, which want nothing more to do than to eat her alive, or simply possess her, or even just straight up rape her. This was a pretty fucked up episode in many senses, but there were a lot of satisfying moments. Like I said earlier, I think one of my favorite things about this episode is how they took this one-off demon that Guts just completely destroys in the manga version, who has pretty much zero personality, and they gave him a lot of that in this episode because he is the caretaker of all of these animals, he really cares for them, and even the family that lived there before, in particular the daughter, who he quite literally has up on a freaking mantle. He has her stalked up on the wall, just her head, like a really creepy hunter to sort of always remember her, and that's sort of like the only thing that's keeping this guy in check. But whenever a human arrives, especially a very pretty human woman, it sort of sends him into this rage. Not to mention when he sees Guts, he's reminded that this is the guy who escaped from the eclipse, so of course this is going to result into a big battle with both Guts and this apostle just plowing through walls and constantly attacking each other, this thing biting down on Guts' leg, Guts taking his sword and shoving it right into his face, eventually getting the upper hand on him when he tricks him with that one girl that he was in love with, presenting the head right in front of him, which gets completely destroyed, leaving him in a daze, which allows Guts to fire a couple of arrows right into his face, and then finishing him off with one big stab. I will say, in the manga version, when Guts actually destroys this demon, it's a lot more satisfying, because not only does he just, like, cut him up multiple times, but he blasts him with his cannon, and then actually finishes him off by cutting him completely in half down the middle. This is something, unfortunately, that does not happen in this episode, but still, I really liked the stylistic change, and I loved the change of location going to this, like, dark setting. I thought it was really interesting, to say the least. We have to remember, this is the Berserk anime series. It is not the Berserk manga series. There are going to be some differences. And apparently the creator, Kentaro Miura, is actually making a lot of these choices. He's actually telling the animation team to do this for the story in order to make it a slightly different adaptation of the story. But most of the story beats are still there, especially with Farnace in this episode, who is just having her mind completely melted by all of the crazy shit that she's been seeing, being nearly eaten alive multiple times, not to mention being possessed at the very end of the episode, which is a really fucked up scene, and this is all after coming after the fact that she was about to be raped by this horse. That's right, the horse that Guts actually stole and was riding in this episode gets possessed by this demon and tries to rape Farnese, but that's when Guts comes in and he's reminded of the instance where his loved one, Casca, was being raped in front of him. So he just brings out his sword and just completely decapitates this horse, just barely missing Farnese's neck. The thing is, though, this leaves her susceptible to being possessed by demons, and that's what happens at the end of this episode, where this demon is getting into her head and basically molesting her in a really creepy way, letting her know that even though you are a woman of God, you still do things that are not exactly godly. Like when you were punishing yourself, you were actually sort of getting off on that just a little bit. When you were torturing Guts. And this leads to a scene with her taking all of her clothes off, straddling Guts' Dragon Slayer sword, which is a little censored, by the way, and getting right up in Guts' face, basically trying to tempt him, but then trying to kill him. But luckily, the morning light comes in, shines in, and she is turned back to normal. Or at least as normal as she can be after all of these crazy events. Luckily, Serpico also decides to return, and it looks like both Farnese and Serpico are finally going to go off and do their own thing. But Serpico actually tests Guts in this episode by trying to attack him with his sword. Another scene which was in the manga version, but that's not going to work. Guts is the freaking black swordsman. He ain't gonna fall for that shit. There's also a lot of teasing at the very end of the episode for the return of the main villain of the series, Griffith. A lot of this stuff is going to be very confusing for those who do not read the manga version, especially if you didn't watch any of the previous anime versions, because they go back to this storyline where there is this kingdom, the kingdom of Tudor, or Midland, actually, is what it's actually called. And the king is basically on his deathbed, and his daughter is completely freaking out. His daughter is in love with Griffith, by the way, and it seems like everyone in the kingdom, in the general area, had this dream where they saw this vision of this white hawk that was coming in through the darkness, which is basically the signaling that Griffith is going to return. And Griffith is a fantastic villain, you know. I cannot wait to see his initial confrontations with Guts in this series. It's just going to be spine-tingling, to say the least. Not to mention, there's all types of other crazy shit going on. There's this big army that's appearing right outside of Midland with all of these big war elephants. Shit's about to go down, and the preview for the next episode looks just even more exciting as we get the introduction of another key villain of this arc who goes by the name of Mozgus, but we'll get into him when we get to the next episode. So, what's the rundown on this week's episode of Berserk? Man, this one was just disgusting. That's really the only word that I can use to describe this one. Just so much bloodshed, lots of just really fucked up scenes with all the demons constantly trying to eat Farnese or freaking rape her all at the same time. It's just pure disturbingness. And, you know, not even just the horse and the dogs, but the whole backstory of that one caretaker who was looking after the hounds. Just, that was a really ingenious idea to bring some rich character development to a character who really wasn't even all that important in the first place, but it also did a good job of establishing why Guts is doing what he's doing, something that he never really got to get across to Farnese that early in the story, and this was a great way to do that. Also to rectify the scene where we see him actually killing this demon when he gets the Dragon Slayer for the first time. I have a feeling we were never going to see that scene, period, so this is kind of like the next best thing in getting that in the storyline. Otherwise, this one right here was just as stylistic and crazy as the last couple of episodes, especially Guts when he's fighting against the demons, all the crazy camera sweeps, just the sound of his sword as it plows into the bodies of demons is just satisfying as hell. And like I said in the previous review, if you didn't like the CG animation in the first couple of episodes, you're probably not going to like it here. It's still kind of a mixture of traditional animation mixed with CG animation, and whenever they switch to these two different styles, it can be a little jarring at moments. That being said, I find myself being completely sucked into every episode. It manages to be very atmospheric. All of the monster designs are really awesome, and I love that Farnese got some great development in this episode. Not to mention we got to learn a little bit more about Guts and his overall mission, and just seeing just how freaking badass he is. When his leg is being chomped on by a demon, like, he's not even really worried about it that much, and he's even trying to tell the demon, he's like, look, I don't really taste that good, man. It's not gonna work out for you. You just know it's only a matter of time before Guts just completely destroys these guys, and that's what he does this week, and he does it in style. That's one thing I will give this series some credit for. It's definitely got its own style going for it, and it's making it a pretty nice adaptation of the Berserk series. Is it perfect? Hell freaking no. Is it entertaining? Hell freaking yes, and that's exactly why you should check out the brand new Berserk anime series. I loved this episode right here. There was a lot of great teasing, a lot of great action, and all of the character moments are great, and all of the freaky moments really hit at home, so this was just a pretty solid episode of Berserk, if you want to know the truth. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I do think that some of the animation moments are a little jarring, and no, I'm not entirely happy with some of the choices they're making with the storytelling, but I'm not really opposed to it either. You know, I don't outright hate it. I'm actually kind of really digging it. I like the change, because these are stories that I've read multiple times, and to see some minor differences attached to them really isn't all that bad, especially because it's never going to ruin the Berserk manga series. If I ever want to read Berserk, I'll read Berserk. If I want to watch the anime, I'll watch the anime. They're completely different things, and they can both be enjoyed on different levels. So make sure to check it out, Berserk fans. If you're looking for a kick-ass action dark anime series this season, you gotta check out Berserk. And if you haven't seen any of the previous iterations of the series, do it now. It's freaking awesome. So there it is. That's my thoughts on this week's episode. But I want to hear from you guys. Before you guys leave today, make sure to tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Berserk. What did you think about this week's freaky deaky episode? Are you okay with some of the story changes that they've added? Did you like seeing that one demon finally return and fight against Guts? Did you like the story that they added to him with him becoming an apostle, being obsessed with that young daughter? And what do you want to see from the rest of the brand new Berserk anime series? Please tell me in the comments section below. You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching this review. I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and one of the best ways to help us out is to simply share this video and comment on it and share it with all your buddies. Thank you again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.